Welcome to the First Cup podcast. This is your preview of the FedEx Cup playoffs. We've got plenty in store for you coming in this show, and the Wyndham Championship is indeed underway. Let me bring in Patrick McDonald, Greg DuCharme. Patrick, good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Rick, I hope you enjoyed the day off there, just like the rest of the PGA Tour players. And I'm excited to get into a little FedEx Cup preview.
Yeah, I am as well. And Greg DuCharme is also here. Greg, good to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here, gentlemen. Normally this hour we're talking about who's going to make the cut. We're, a round and a half into a tournament by this time in a normal week, but this is a very unique situation where we still have the early morning wave out on the golf course for their first round at the Wyndham.
Yeah, I'm happy to report the Wyndham Championship has indeed started, Patrick, but we missed out on the entirety of Thursday. No golf was played yesterday, and after a Friday morning delay today, the boys did eventually get out there at 9:50 a.m. local time. So golf is being played. We're going to have to find a way to get 72 holes in here, but it seems like we might be bearing down on a Monday finish.
Yeah, they're going to be playing catch up these next couple days. Seems like Sunday is going to be the day where a lot of golf is going to be played, right? You would think tomorrow they finally make the cut. I don't know if they can turn around and start the third round just with how many players have to play their second round. And then on Sunday, it'll be go, go, go from the crack of dawn, just trying to play as much golf as possible to make Monday as short as possible. But look, if you have guys like Beau Hossler playing this quick in as few strokes as possible, turning in less than 30, maybe it will be possible for these guys. Definitely on 59 watch. Sorry to jinx them right then and there. But with a rain-soaked Sedgefield Country Club and Preferred Lies, expect some really low scores today and throughout the weekend.
Yeah, Beau Hossler about to make the turn at 7 under. It's a par 70, so a chance he gets to that magic number if he can keep things going. And Greg, there's not really any question of how the first day or two are going to go here. It is from sun up to sundown, as much golf that can be played as possible. Where we will run into, I don't want to say a problem, but where we're going to have to figure this out is when the cut gets made after the second round. And how quickly can we get those golfers who make the cut right back out on the golf course and get those golfers who have not made the cut out of town. Also, while we've seen this week in and week out, some of these cut lines get very sweaty. We might have to wait around to see what that number is.
Yeah, I would imagine there's going to be a little bit of waiting around for the players near that bubble. And then the other aspect is if you are near the bubble, you're likely to go right out. It's either I'm going home or I'm going out on the golf course. And so not only after the cut do you have to figure out who's in and who's out and whether or not you can start on presumably Saturday evening. But the next question is, well, what's the order? What's the tee times? How much time do we need to get everybody back out on the golf course? Those are the logistical aspects of a golf tournament that typically just get handled behind the scenes. But in a week like this, it's going to be kind of first and foremost. It'll be front of mind. It'll be covered on the broadcast. And I know we'll be talking about it as well.
Yeah, it'll be a couple of long nights ahead, Patrick, and we could put a bow on the Wyndham Championship conversation with this, because you're right. Once we do get out in, presumably 3 balls on both tees with just the final players who have made the cut only out on the golf course, this is going to time. The forecast is looking generally pretty good. I don't see any way that this doesn't finish on Monday. Maybe it's 9 holes on Monday. Maybe it's a little more, a little bit less. But I think we are going to get a conclusion here. We're going to get our final 70 heading to Memphis next week.
Exactly. And you mentioned the top 70. Obviously, it's a huge week for a lot of those guys on the bubble and just making sure they can allocate the FedEx Cup points. And so a late start into the week, it's going to throw off
So we're going to turn our attention to this spicy FedEx Cup race. We've got a lot of fun things coming up where we're going to see how far back golfers can come from to potentially win this FedEx Cup. And we're going to cover a whole lot more. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cup Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. We are turning our attention to the FedEx Cup playoffs because after the Wyndham Championship concludes, we're heading straight to Memphis for the FedEx St. Jude Championship. And Greg, this is just the second season of this chopping down to 70 golfers instead of 125, right? This is a much more exclusive club to now get yourself into the postseason.
Yeah, it's significantly more competitive. You think about there, I believe 4 players that have won who are outside the top 70 in the FedEx Cup standings, which means they're outside the playoffs. I definitely think there's a positive aspect to that, but there are some players competing at the Wyndham this week who have a lot of work to do to get in, who have played really good golf this year. And you think back to last year, Shane Lowry played a lot of really good golf, not quite good enough to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs. Justin Thomas didn't get into the FedEx Cup playoffs last year. There are fewer big names on the outside looking in this year, but there are still some really talented players who I believe have the stuff to make a move in the playoffs, but it all hinges on this week as a result. So it's been much more competitive, and I think overall, at least for fans, a more positive thing.
Yeah, indeed. It's a better core of golfers that ends up getting into the postseason. Now, let's start at the top here, Patrick, because while we've been spending a lot of time this week talking about the implications of the Wyndham Championship, guys that are just in or just out, there is no doubt that Scottie Scheffler and Xander Schauffele are going to be making a deep run in these FedEx Cup playoffs, the favorites to actually hoist that FedEx Cup at East Lake. And it is Scottie Scheffler who has currently amassed nearly a 2,000-point lead on Scottie Scheffler, who has a 1,500-point lead on Rory McIlroy. So these two are truly in a class of their own right now.
A couple different flights there. You have the Scottie Scheffler flight, the Xander Schauffele flight, kind of the SCH flights there, and then you got Rory McIlroy leading everyone else there in the FedEx Cup standings. But yeah, like you mentioned, Scottie Scheffler's season's obviously been unbelievable. 6 wins that count towards the FedEx Cup. The Olympics, unfortunately, he did not get any points for those. I'm sure the PGA Tour tried to somehow get FedEx Cup points into the Olympics. The IOC wasn't buying it. And then only 2 finishes outside the top 10. So I am interested with Scheffler. Is the one bugaboo I think you could say in his game. Obviously it comes down onto the greens, but in particular, very fast Bermuda greens he has always struggled on. And you saw that there at TPC Southwind before. I believe that's the site of his last missed cut when it was back to the top 125 a couple years ago. And then you've seen it at East Lake 2 years now, where he's entered that tournament, the Tour Championship, with the lead, only to give it up to Rory McIlroy and to give it up to a red-hot Victor Hovland last year. He didn't even finish second. Xander Schauffele did. So that's what I'm really interested in. I mean, the BMW, I'm sure, will be a great course fit for him. It seems like his floor, like I mentioned, is a top 10 finish. But I think just with the added FedEx Cup points for a win, you get 2,000 as opposed to 500 for a regular season. I think there's a path there where Scottie Scheffler, despite winning 7 times this year, despite maybe even winning 1 or 2 more times in the postseason, isn't your Tour Championship winner, isn't your FedEx Cup winner, which would just add to, it would just make it weird, add to the lore of the FedEx Cup in general.
So to put that a little bit into perspective, Greg, Patrick is correct. These playoff victories are worth 2,000 points, which is the lead that Scottie has on Xander right now. So essentially 1 playoff victory without Scottie earning anything, which is probably very unlikely. But having 1 more point than second place gets you a 2-shot lead, and having 1 million more points than second place gets you a 2-shot lead. So it doesn't really matter how many points you have as long as you get into the correct order. And to also put a bow on that with Patrick, East Lake hasn't necessarily been a happy hunting ground for Scottie Scheffler in his career.
No, it hasn't. I wouldn't say that the play as a whole has been poor, although he's had some really difficult stretches, like he did most memorably with Rory McIlroy. He had a 6-shot lead and let that slip. He played some good golf in that tournament leading into that final round, but was unable to get the job done. So I don't look at Eastlake as a bad course fit for Scotty Scheffler. I think, Patrick was talking about the Bermuda greens, and that's certainly been a struggle for him at Eastlake. But he did putt very well at the Arnold Palmer Invitational this year, which is Bermuda greens. They tend to be pretty quick. So he's had some success in Florida at least. That being said, I think the real struggle for Scotty Scheffler, the one big area of concern is the fact that it's only a 2-shot lead. And the FedEx Cup as a whole comes down to just one tournament. And if Scotty doesn't bring his best stuff and a Victor Hovland type player, somebody gets on a Victor Hovland type run, whether it's Xander Schauffele, who has an incredible record at Eastlake, Rory McIlroy, who has an incredible record at Eastlake, they certainly have the capability of beating Scotty Scheffler's B-plus game by 3 strokes, by 2 strokes, something like that. So even though Scotty has had by far the best regular season, it's almost like the NFL playoffs now, where the best team in the playoffs is going to be crowned the champion. And what you did in the regular season at this point doesn't matter.
How many guys conceivably could win this, Patrick? I know we are a long way from even knowing who is in the Tour Championship, a long way from knowing where they're going to be starting. But is the list for long? I mean, we're talking about the 2 best players in the world by a mile, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele. I'm certainly not going to write out Rory McIlroy, who's already got 3 of these in his trophy case. Is the list a lot more than that?
It's 3. You kind of overshot it with 4, in my opinion. It's 3. You have Scotty Scheffler, the best player in the world, like you mentioned, and then you have 2 of the best players, maybe the 2 best players at Eastlake in general. Xander Schauffele won the Tour Championship in 2017, his rookie season. Since then, he has, I believe, 5 straight top 5 finishes, a couple of those shadow leaderboard wins as well. And then you throw in Rory McIlroy, a 3-time FedEx Cup winner, still playing some pretty solid golf. I know the Open Championship didn't go too well for him, but he was right there in with the chance, honestly, to win the gold medal at the Olympic Games before that really poor wedge shot on 15 on Sunday. Played well at the Scottish Open too, and you throw him on a comfortable golf course like Eastlake, and anything can happen, as he has shown. So I think there's a gap between Scheffler and Schauffele. There's a gap between Schauffele and McIlroy, but I think there's a pretty large gap between McIlroy and the rest of the field, especially when everyone descends on Eastlake.
I tend to agree with Patrick here, Greg, but let me lay out a scenario for you, because this is the way that I think that this list gets bigger here. I think that all 3 of those guys are capable of winning from 5 shots back if that were to happen. Unlikely for Scotty, unlikely for Xander, but imagine a scenario in which Collin Morikawa wins a playoff event, gets his 2,000 points, and jumps up to 2nd, starting the Tour Championship. So say we have Scotty at 10 under, Morikawa at 8 under, Schauffele at 7 under, and Rory McIlroy at 6 under. All those the big 3 all have the firepower to come from multiple shots back. I think if someone who has been playing great with a big time pedigree wins a playoff event and jumps into that top 4 or 5, I think it becomes a lot more interesting.
Yeah, I think it does too. And while I don't think we'll enter Eastlake with a much bigger list than 4, and I certainly understand Patrick's point, those 3 players are definitely the class of the fields, all the fields that we'll see in the FedEx Cup playoffs, but this is golf. And I would give the fact that one of those 3 wins the FedEx Cup playoffs probably a 75 to 80% chance that happens. I wouldn't go much higher than that, because this is simply the game of golf, and crazier things have happened. You look at a Collin Morikawa, you look at a Patrick Cantlay, even a Hideki Matsuyama or a Tony Finau. If the scenario that you lay out here, Rick, where all of a sudden they are winning a playoff event or 2 heading into the Tour Championship, and they get within a couple shots of that lead with the staggered start, then all of a sudden this conversation looks very different. At that point, it is probably 4. Whichever one of those outsiders works their way into the top three, in this scenario, those guys would absolutely have a chance to win, and they would expand that possibility. So in a strange way, I still think it's wide open, but it's going to take a pretty significant run. And Xander Schauffele, Scotty Scheffler, and Rory McIlroy are certainly really big roadblocks that any of these, we'll call them outsiders, any of these guys will have to overcome.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place. We'll put a bow on it with this, Patrick, because the way that the points are distributed, 4x in the playoffs, right? All the hard work that was done all year long for these two events to get distributed in a completely different way at a 4x multiplier. Do you think that that's the right way to do this? Is that a way to make sure that everybody who gets into the playoffs has a somewhat realistic chance of winning the FedEx Cup? They probably have to win one of the first two to make that happen. But is that the right way to go, or are the top guys not being rewarded enough?
I think that's fair. I think the top guys are rewarded plenty, and I think this gives an opportunity, like you said. I mean, they're rewarded through a number of mechanisms, plenty, but I think this gives a way for someone like Lucas Glover last year, who snuck into the playoffs and then won at TPC Southwind to make a run towards the Tour Championship. Someone like Billy Horschel, what he did way back when. And so if you make the playoffs, you still have a chance. If you're 60 to 70, it's a very, very slim chance. But like you mentioned, Rick, with the 4 times points, you still have a chance. And like Greg laid out, this is golf. Weird things can happen. But balls can bounce in weird directions, and all of a sudden you blink and, oh my gosh, Justin Rose is your FedEx Cup champion because he won in Memphis, and then he came from 7 back at Eastlake because Scheffler had a bad couple days. So I think it's fair, and I think it gives enough leeway for those who might not have had the best regular season, but they're still in the playoffs to still have a chance to take down the title.
You just got to get to the dance. That's what they say in a lot of other sports, and that's what we say here in golf as well. Maybe we don't say it, but we will start saying it. There are plenty of big names lurking right behind the big 3, big 4, big 5. We're going to get into those guys and much, much more after a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network, and we are talking FedEx Cup playoffs. We've talked about the guys just outside, just inside, and those at the top, but there are plenty of big names lurking inside the top 10 of the FedEx Cup standings, inside the top 20 of the FedEx Cup standings, who are going to have a lot of great positioning throughout the next couple of weeks. And I want to start with Wyndham Clark, Greg, because this is, to me, one of the most interesting seasons that we've had on the PGA Tour. He wins the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. That was a rain-shortened 54-hole event. He's got a couple of really strong top 10 finishes, but it feels like he has completely disappeared as of late. There's a lot of frustration within his game, but he is currently 5th, number 5 in the FedEx Cup standings. An unbelievable position to be in for a guy that no one can really thinks has any momentum going into the playoff season.
No, although he may have gathered some at the Olympics. I'll tell you what, he got off to a rough start, shot 75 in the opening round, and finished that tournament with 68, 65, 65. And it kind of reminded me that, hey, Wyndham Clark still has a whole lot of game. One of his advantages among the top players in the game is he's a phenomenal putter. And he probably is right up there with Xander Schauffele as one of the most consistent putters of the top players in the game. And that will go a long way for him. But on the downside, he seems to be extremely volatile with his iron play. Last year, when he had that great season winning the U.S. Open and winning the Wells Fargo as well, he made a huge stride in his career with his iron play. And this year, it was really strong at the beginning. It looked like it was continuing on. He came in second in back-to-back weeks to Scotty Scheffler at the Arnold Palmer Invitational and the Players, with one of the nastiest lip-outs on the 72nd hole that I've ever seen to force a playoff. So we were seeing the great iron play then. Since then, it's really fallen off in a very inconsistent sense. So I'm very curious, what version of Wyndham Clark are we going to get? Because if we get the good Wyndham Clark, like we saw the last 3 rounds at the Olympics, he can go win the Tour Championship. But there could be one day where you see a 78 out of Wyndham Clark, and he's done. He's shown us that capability as well.
That lip out so brutal that Wyndham Clark fist pumped it not once, but twice, thinking that it was going down. It did not drop. I do think he is a very interesting X factor for these FedEx Cup playoffs. And I'd also throw this next guy, Patrick, into the mix as well, and that's Sahith Theegala. He has been an incredibly high ceiling golfer over his young career. He's starting to get more consistent. He's clearly getting better week in and week out. I think if you asked a lot of people, what's Sahith's current FedEx Cup standing, they'd be surprised to learn that he's 7th. He has earned he's earned over 2,000 points already this year, and he's put himself in a great spot to try to make his deepest run yet.
He seems to have gotten the most out of his really quality starts, and it started there at the Century, contending there, played well in Phoenix also, but let's just look this past month. It hasn't been that consistent, missing the cut at the Open. But when he's played good, he's finished inside the top 10, was right there at the Scottish Open, put a new putter in the bag there at the 3M Open, finished inside the top 10 also. So this has been a great year for Sahith in many regards. It's his best off the tee year, best approach year, and the putter's kind of been hit or miss. And so I think that's why we saw a new putter there at TPC Twin Cities. But he pretty much said, yeah, the blade, the gamer, that's just on the bench. Come playoff time, low load management, going to rest it up. It's coming back in place. So this will be his likely, I assume, at number 7, he's going to make the Tour Championship. His second in the last 3 years qualifying for Eastlake. Just missed out last year, number 31, last man out. So this has been a guy who has really been a can't-miss kid since his days at Pepperdine, just running through the collegiate ranks, and then obviously what he's doing now. And so the ceiling's definitely there. I think there's some concerns similar to Wyndham Clark about that floor. It has certainly risen compared to other years, but I don't know if it's still high enough to contend with the likes of a Scotty, a Xander, and a Rory McIlroy at the Tour Championship if he gives himself a chance.
Yeah, it's a massive stage, lots of money on the line. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Before the show started, we each picked a golfer that is kind of in this range who might be able to make a run at the FedEx Cup. And Greg, we're going to talk about all 3 of those guys next. But Greg, I want to have you talk about your golfer, and I want you to tell everybody who it is, because this is somebody who has entered this year and basically every year of their career with a lot of high expectations, and I'm not quite sure that he's always lived up to those despite having a phenomenal career thus far.
Yes, and it includes a FedEx Cup, and that would be Patrick Cantlay, who I'm very curious in. I mean, he's been dealing with the PGA policy board. He's been a PAC member. There have been some people have said he's been actually running the PGA Tour, which I find to be very interesting. And I don't know how much stress that is put on him. But the one good thing that I see with Patrick Cantlay at this point is he is coming in very fresh. He only played once in July, and that was at the U.S. Open. The Open Championship. The U.S. Open was his best major championship finish, or his most realistic chance to win, where he finished tied 3rd and really was a serious factor in that tournament all the way up until the 72nd hole. So we haven't seen a whole lot of Patrick Cantlay. He's not on the front of our minds, but he is right there in this FedEx Cup race. And I think he still shows the ability to get extremely hot on the green. And he did not putt very well in Scotland at the Open Championship, but his iron play which has been a weakness for him, surprisingly, for all of his pedigree. His iron play has been a weakness, yet at the same time, he comes into the playoffs gaining strokes in 5 straight events approaching the green. With his firepower and form that, in my opinion, is starting to turn in a positive direction, I think Patrick Cantlay can make a really serious run here at the FedEx Cup.
Yeah, he's lurking. He's certainly lurking. And Patrick, your golfer is the one that for stat heads like me get really excited about. Somebody who has a couple of elite skill sets, but has really started to fix the one hole in his game, specifically the putter. I'm referring to Tony Finau here. Make the case for why he's the guy that you think can kind of fly in here and make a run at the FedEx Cup playoffs.
I stole Greg's guy. I had a feeling he might want to put him, but I was first to the outline. Apologies, Greg. I know hunky tone, big tone is typically your guy. But like you mentioned there, it's his best approach season of his career. You take away the Open where he was in the bad draw, went 71, 81, missed the cut. It's been 6 straight top 20 finishes, a lot of contention runs, played well at the 3M Open. And you mentioned the putter. He's gained in 6 or 7 straight tournaments. It's been great. A completely different Tony Finau on the greens. And so I look at these playoff venues, TPC Southwind, he has a top 5 finish over the last couple years. And guess what? Bad putters can win at TPC Southwind. Will Zalatoris, Lucas Glover, the last 2 winners there. If Finau gets off to a hot start, boom, he's right in the mix with only 8 rounds left in the 2024 season. He's played well at the Tour Championship throughout his career. The FedEx Cup playoffs before the Northern Trust there at Liberty National a few years ago. So why not give it a good run again, Finau? He seems to be lurking around that winner circle and why not during the postseason?
Yeah, the last time Tony Finau won a playoff event, they just got rid of it, and it no longer exists anymore. My golfer is Hideki Matsuyama, who, Greg, I want to get your help with this one because we have been seeing some really good stuff out of Hideki this year. Obviously, the scorching Sunday where he gets a win at Riviera and then he gets himself on the podium at the Olympics. He has discussed, kind of battling through some lingering injuries all year long. He always WDs a little bit more frequently than we would like, but when he is healthy and his game is on, he is one of the maybe 6 best players in the world for my money.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I'm not surprised that he's your play here, Rick. It's something that we talk about on our Monday DFS show a lot. If Hideki is in the field, you treat him like he's going to play, and you play him. And the reason for that is his performances have been so strong, and it really has become a well-rounded game. He's answered questions about his putter. His short game is the very best on the PGA Tour, which for somebody with a background of being a all-time ball striker is a really good attribute to have. That starts to put you into Scotty Scheffler type territory when you can flag it with your irons the way Hideki can, when you can drive it the way he can, and you add a wonderful short game, phenomenal touch around the greens. That is just brilliant stuff from Hideki Matsuyama, which he's continued to show. And I was so impressed with his performance at the Olympics as well, Rick. So I think this is such a good pick. Patrick, yours is a great pick as well. But what Hideki Matsuyama did at the Olympics was classic Hideki Matsuyama.
Yes, good pick, everybody. Pat each other on the back. We'll all have a lot of fun checking in on these in a couple of weeks. We are not even close to done. We're going deeper, much deeper down the board. We're going to continue this conversation after a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast, continuing our conversation, getting you prepared for the FedEx Cup playoffs, which start in Memphis, Tennessee next week. And gentlemen, with the way that Scotty Scheffler and Xander Schauffele have done so much damage this year in the wins department, there is just a ton of really talented, great golfers who have not really had the season that they were probably expecting to have coming into 2024. But they're still, as we've talked about with the structure of these playoffs, very live to make a deep run. And Patrick, I'm going to start here with you and with Sungjae Im, because the start of 2024 was miserable. I'm sure he would be the first to tell you that, but we are starting to see a guy play to his DNA, get back to being so well-rounded. The results are coming. Sungjae Im has been a target on the First Cut Podcast, maybe not winning enough as he should in his career. What's your expectations for Sungjae over the next 3 weeks?
The Prince. Well, I expected him to win the Wyndham Championship, but with the way Beau Hossler's rolling, who knows if that's going to happen. But like you mentioned, the start of the year was not great for Sungjae Im, dealing with a little bit of a neck injury there, perhaps from looking at his backswing while swinging so often, and that's healed up. He's 100%, and the results have followed. He won the Woori Financial Group on the Korean PGA Tour. That's the second straight season he's won on that tour, the week before the PGA Championship, and it's been kind of odd. You look at his major starts, Miscut at the Masters, miscut at the PGA Championship, miscut at the US Open. You're like, what the heck are you doing, Sungjae? But on the PGA Tour, it's top 12 finish after top 12 finish. Finally got off the major schneid a little bit there at Royal Troon with the T7 finish, and he's at a comfy spot this week at the Wyndham Championship where he's never finished outside the top 25. He's played well at Eastlake before in his history, and like you mentioned, Rick, it's as well-rounded as it comes when it comes to games on the PGA Tour. So I expect a really good FedEx Cup playoffs from Sungjae just based on what he's done recently. But like you mentioned,
the Sungjae Im heater is a very good time to get hot, Greg. If you're going to get hot right now, which takes me to someone like Shane Lowry, who's been having a lot of success both by himself and with his partner, Rory McIlroy. They won the Zurich Classic together. Shane Lowry is an incredibly talented veteran who probably has not had the season-long results that he has been looking for, but giving an opportunity to start off with a better positioning going into the playoffs this year, I think gives Lowry a little bit of a leg up in 2024.
Yeah, well, we've gotten a chance to see Shane Lowry a little bit more often this season because he's gotten himself in the mix. He was in the mix at Royal Troon. It didn't go the way he hoped. Hit a couple of shots that really put him out of the tournament. But all in all, he's in those positions because he is playing so well. He's driving the ball extremely well and extremely accurately. His iron play has been just awesome. Some of the best of his career. And, you know, the thing that Patrick and I spent a lot of time talking about early in the year was dramatic struggles on the greens. I mean, he was losing 5, 6, 7 strokes in a tournament just on the greens alone. And it was really putting him out of contention. Now, after the PGA Championship at Valhalla, where he got really hot with the putter, things seem to have leveled off with the putter a little bit, and it doesn't seem to be such a big concern. So all in all, now all of a sudden you're looking at a player who's pretty complete, and they have the stuff to get themselves in the mix. The big questions about Shane Lowry now are when he is in contention, how is he going to handle it? If he does hit a shot into the water at TPC Southwind, which is a very common occurrence, how is he going to handle that? Is he going to get frustrated? Is he going to keep his composure and continue to compete? If he's able to do that, I think Shane Lowry could make a serious move in the playoffs as well.
Currently 10th in the FedEx Cup standings. Very good start for Shane Lowry, and he is playing the Wyndham Championship, so he has an opportunity to improve on that. Just like we did in an earlier segment, we each picked a golfer from kind of this next tier back that has the best chance of making a run at the top, maybe not winning the FedEx Cup, but making a little bit of noise and lining their pockets as well. And Patrick, when I saw that you had Russell Henley in your selection here, I was 0% surprised. You have been calling him a top 10 player in the world this year. We have been mocking you, but to your credit, it might not be his world ranking, but his FedEx Cup ranking is currently 13th, which is pretty darn close.
Wow, the corrupt FedEx Cup ranking not putting Russell Henley inside the top 10. You got to wonder if they're rewarding these guys enough in the regular season, because he's one of the few guys to make the cut in all 4 major championships, top 10 at the US Open and the Open also. And you look at his run in the FedEx Cup previously, he has a top 5 finish there at TPC Southwind over the last couple of years. He seems like he's a sure thing for the Tour Championship. That would be the first time in his career he's gone back-to-back qualifying for Eastlake. So it just goes to show you the strides that he's made this year. And we think about Russell Henley typically kind of almost a Shane Lowry type, where accurate off the tee, a great iron player, but the putter can fall apart, at least this past half decade for Russell Henley. But this year, Rick, oh my goodness, it's like rookie Russell Henley all over again. Give him the flat brim Nike hat and give him that blade putter, because he's rolling the rock beautifully. And I think that's going to be the difference maker for Russell Henley in this postseason compared to other postseasons. So he finished 3rd at the Tour Championship in 2017, which I'm really hanging my hat on, even though that was a long, long time ago. But I think Russell Henley has the chops to surprise and maybe finish inside the top 5 of the FedEx Cup by year's end.
basically a home game when he gets to East Lake, so he can put a good capper on his year. Greg, your selection was Akshay Bhatia, which I love. Already a winner this year and probably could have won once or twice more.
Yes, the big thing that stands out to me with Akshay Bhatia is his improvement on the greens. Again, this is a really young player. He's 22 years old. The only thing in Akshay's career that happened a long, long time ago was him starting to play the game of golf. Around the time that he's in the drive, chip, and putt is the time when Russell Henley is playing in the Tour Championship and helping support Patrick's pick for Russell Henley. So when you look at what Akshay has done this year, it's a huge improvement on the greens. Gone from 183rd in strokes gained putting all the way up to 36th this year, and he's maintained his ability with his ball striking. He's 17th in strokes gained approach the green. He's extremely accurate off the tee, 30th on the PGA Tour in that category. I think that'll go a long way at TPC Southwind. And for somebody as young as him, making a really early, quite frankly, an early appearance into a Tour Championship, I think Akshay could make some noise. And also, lastly, not dissimilar to Russell Henley, he's a North Carolina kid, so he is accustomed to these types of grasses. At least that we'll see at TPC Southwind and at East Lake in Atlanta.
Akshay Bhatia for Greg, Russell Henley for Patrick, and I went with Corey Connors. And this is kind of a little bit in similarity with Tony Finau. You know, you have a great built-in floor, the ability to ball strike it and to keep it out of the thick rough because he plays out of the fairway so frequently. And ever since the Canadian Open, he has really started to figure out the flat stick. You see him there at the Olympics where he played very well, and he is now he's not a consistently good putter every week, but he is having some of these spike weeks, which I think is what you want to be able to see as you're trying to win, you're trying to make a run, you're trying to go deep into the playoffs. If you can gain 3 or 4 strokes with the putter in a single event, you have the ability to get into that top 5 or potentially win one of these smaller field events. Gentlemen, I think we're going to put a pin in it for there because I've got much more to talk about with you. Here's what I want to do. I want to look at the Billy Horschel effect, the Billy Horschel rule. Who can make a deep run in this? We'll get you a Wyndham Championship update and see where the rest of this conversation takes us. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cup Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. We're here to give you not only some FedEx Cup playoff takes, but also a Wyndham Championship update. Gentlemen, it has been a slog to get this tournament going. The good news is we finally have some players who have completed their first round. Justin Suh is 5 under in the clubhouse at a 60 with 65. Rio Hisatsune, a 3 under round of 67. So nice to see these scores finally rolling in. The problem, however, Patrick, is that the Wyndham Championship has just issued an alert letting fans know that there is inclement weather coming, that they need to be prepared to leave the premises or seek shelter. So it seems like there is another cell of this storm rolling through that might delay action even further.
I think that storm has a name, and it's Jordan Spieth. How about him inside the top 5, 3 under? I saw him make an eagle there on the par 5, but this week has just been a completely logistical nightmare for everyone. I saw the tournament director out there chopping down trees, trying to get the course playable at Sedgefield Country Club. They had a lot of island greens yesterday. I wish they kind of played those, honestly. It looked pretty cool. But nightmare on trying to finish this tournament on time. No way they do it now, and hopefully it's only a Monday finish, right? That's what we're praying for at this point.
Fingers crossed. We're holding thumbs. We're doing everything we need to do to get this tournament completed on Monday. It would also not be the First Cup Podcast, gentlemen, if I didn't hit you with some useless trivia, and I'm going to do that right now. There are currently 7 golfers who have ever made $20 million in FedEx Cup bonuses. Can we name those 7 golfers?
Rory McIlroy.
He is number 1, $54 million.
Victor Hovland.
That is correct, $21 million, thanks to the $18 million he earned last year.
We're talking 20 million. Well, let's see. Justin Rose.
Justin Rose falls just short of this list.
Bill Haas.
Wow.
Not Bill Haas. Who's the answer to every single trivia question?
Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods did it with a lot of work in 2007 and 2009. That's right.
Vijay Singh.
Who's always been good at East Lake?
Xander Schauffele.
Xander Schauffele is correct. Okay.
Patrick Cantlay.
20 million without FedEx Cup.
Patrick Cantlay is another. We've got two more, and their names are very similar. One of them plays on Live Golf now.
John Rahm and Ron John.
That's right, Patrick. Dustin Johnson and Justin Thomas. Congratulations. You have got the last two. Now, I want more winners. I want more guys that are going to make a run at this for $25 million. Greg, the Billy Horschel pick, the guy who gets hot in the playoffs, who makes a run, and he's the one hoisting the cup and $25 million. Who's the guy?
Rick, you cut out with your audio a little bit there, so I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear what you were saying. I heard $25 million hosting the trophy. Can you fill me in a little bit more? I'm sorry to make everybody listen to that again.
Who's the Billy Horschel guy, Greg? Who's your pick to be the Billy Horschel guy this year?
My pick to be the Billy Horschel guy is, of course, Johnny Vegas, who I think is going to make a significant move. I'm very excited about Johnny Vegas. And look at this. He's 67th in the FedEx Cup. He is but at the same time, he's 39th in strokes gained total. Do you think his victory at the 3M Open was just out of the blue and it was random? But I'm here to tell you it was anything but. Even though he's been dealing with injuries, he's 5th on the PGA Tour in strokes gained off the tee. He's 13th in strokes gained approach the green. And you look at greens and regulation, he's 2nd on the PGA Tour. For the whole season, he's hitting over 72% of his greens. Most years, that would lead the PGA Tour. In this year, this era of Scotty Scheffler, it's 2nd, which is still pretty darn good. So I look at Johnny Vegas as a real big-time player at 67th in the FedEx Cup, and I think he has the stuff to compete at each one of these venues.
Oh, maybe get hot and pull it off. Okay, Patrick, your turn. Who's your guy to make a run?
I'm going with Billy's buddy from the Open, Justin Rose, the 2018 FedEx Cup winner. Who could forget? Well, probably everyone, because that was the Tour Championship that Tiger Woods won. But you look from 2012, 2018 at the Tour Championship when it wasn't a staggered start. Rosie finished inside the top 10 each time, a number of runner-up finishes, a number of top 5 finishes, and he's kind of been a bit of a big game hunter as of late. His best 2 starts, well, the PGA Championship and the Open, and he kind of starts the playoffs needing to play well just outside that top 50. So would be the first time he qualifies for the Tour Championship since 2019. Somehow didn't qualify last year despite winning. So Rosie's my guy. He played well at the Open. Doesn't look like he's playing too well at the Wyndham Championship, but a wily veteran who's been there, done that. Come on, give me some Rosie.
Come on, give him some Rosie. I'm going with Aaron Rye, and that is Patrick McDonald and Greg DuCharme of the First Cut Podcast. We are certainly going to hope to get a resolution to this Wyndham Championship on Monday and no later than that. And we're going to turn our attention to those FedEx Cup playoffs with the top 70 moving on to Memphis. If you like what you've heard, we do this nearly every single day. You can watch us on YouTube, the Golf on CBS YouTube channel. You can download the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. We'd certainly love to have you for our round-by-round recaps, our betting previews, and our DFS picks.